You're not alone. I don't know what brought you here today. Maybe you're 1 month from losing everything. Maybe you've been praying for years and the silence is starting to feel like an answer. Maybe you never really knew God at all, but something kept pulling you back. Whatever it is, you're not alone. My name is Kevin,
And I'm Kavita.
and everything we are about to share with you, the unemployment, the tears, the miracles, the mess, we are sharing it for one reason, because He was faithful to us, and He will be faithful to you. Before we continue, maybe we should tell you guys a bit about ourselves and who we are. I'm Kevin. I'm an assistant pastor at Warsaw International Church here in Poland.
And hi everyone, I'm Kavita. I'm a mother of four, five to be honest, including my husband. Yep.
Now, this podcast has one job, and that is to remind you that God is faithful. Not in a bumper sticker kind of way, but in a we nearly lost everything and He still showed up kind of way. We're not going to give you a parenting formula. We're not going to tell you how to have a perfect Christian home, because trust me, with 4 boys, our home is anything but perfect. What we are going to tell you is the truth. Our truth. What we have been through and what we have experienced and what we have come to learn about God. We trust that somewhere in it, you'll find your truth. So, before we go anywhere, let us tell you who we are. Now, a bit about myself. I was born in a pastor's family. My grandfather was a pastor. In fact, he was one of the pioneering pastors of the church in Malaysia. His eldest son, my uncle, followed in his footsteps. So, from the day I was born, I have been in church. And being in church from that age, obviously, you're involved in everything, all of the Christmas plays, the musicals. I grew up being accustomed to life in church. That was my life. And for a large part of my childhood and adolescence and teen years, that was my identity.
Was it very stressful being in a pastor's family and all that? The do and the don'ts and all that. You have rules and all that, right?
At first, no. You learn things that are going to help you later on in life, and it becomes discipline. Things like saying family prayer every night. And
So you learn that from a very young age, right?
yeah, you learn things like that from a young age. But I think as you get older and you become a teenager, you start to rebel. But in this case, the thing you're rebelling against are your parents, your family. And because you have always identified them with God, it becomes a rebellion against God. Now, that's not fair to them, right? They're humans, they make mistakes. But as you're growing up with a child's eyes, you see them as infallible, they're perfect. Whatever they tell you is the truth. So when your parents are the ones telling you God is real, trust in God, believe in God, at a young age, that's something you accept wholeheartedly. But when you get into your teen years, it becomes harder, because these people that you thought were perfect and infallible, turns out they're not so perfect. They're just human, right? So when you start to see them as just human, you start to question everything that they've been telling you. One of those things is God is real. And so I started to question that. And it came to a point in my life where I could not accept that God was real just because someone else had told me so. I had to know that for myself.
What made you to have that thought? Like, what made you to question whether God is real or not? Growing up from a pastor's family, obviously you were exposed to every types of prayers, right? So you would know that the strong hold of God has been there in your family and in yourself. What made you question that later on in your teens?
Because it was their truth, it wasn't my truth. They have gone through those experiences, they have had a relationship with God. My relationship with God was by proxy through my family. It wasn't a direct relationship.
So you did not experience anything for yourself yet?
Nothing profound. I guess you can say God was good to me, but I never really had that direct connection with God. So when I was a teenager, I reached a point where I just said, I cannot accept you are real. And so I literally did this. I looked to heaven one day and I pointed my finger at the sky and I said, if you are real, prove it. And then I walked away. I still had to go to church because my parents would make me, but I was not in it. I was just there in body and nothing else. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't pray. I wanted God to prove that He was real to me, not through my family, not through my parents, nothing. And I wish I can tell you that there was one big moment where God appeared to me like He did to Saul on the road to Tarsus and He said, why are you persecuting me? No, that didn't happen. Instead, what happened is what I like to call a million little pinpricks of love. Over the next 2 years, God started doing things that were undeniably Him in my life. When I look back and I look at all the small things, just tiny little things, catching a break here, something falling my way there, at first you can shrug it off as coincidence or blind luck. But I think as time wore on, it became harder and harder to deny that someone was orchestrating this, that someone was pulling things together so they would work out for my good. And that was always it, right? When something like that happened, it was always for the good. That's when I started to realize I identified with the concept of good, pure good first. And then when I could begin to digest that good is real, then there was no denying that God must be good. And so that's how He brought me back. He brought me back through acts of love, through acts of kindness, through acts of goodness. And by the end of that journey, there was no doubt in my mind that God was real. Now, the question of whether God is real and whether I need to rely on God are two very different questions. So I was at a point in my life now where I knew God is real. God does exist. And the only thing that I needed to reconcile after that was, do I need God? At this point in my life, I had just started working. I was starting to earn money. I had disposable income. And to top it off, I was good at my job. I was getting promoted very quickly.
Basically, you were living the life, right?
I was living the life and I was achieving on top of it. But God had a different idea. God knew that I needed to be stripped down to my bare essentials and then realize how much I did need Him. And He took me on that journey, right? It started when I met Kavita, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but that really was the beginning of the turning point. Over the course of the next decade, I will say, one by one, God started to strip me of my delusions. Where I thought I was smart, He put me in situations where my intelligence couldn't get me out of it. One example was when our third son, Jaden, at the age of 1, had to go in for a 9-hour surgery. I was a smart guy, but there was nothing I could do to guarantee that he would come out of that operating theatre alive. He took away our jobs, Kavita's a few times, mine. We were left at times with nothing in the bank account, so money was no longer a pillar that I could rely on. So one by one, He started to dispossess me of my assumptions. And at the end of that journey, it came to a point where I was fully dependent on Him. I knew that as smart as I thought I was, as wealthy as I thought I could be, all of that meant nothing. That at the end of the day, I needed God because God was the only way I could navigate through this thing called life and still put my head down at night, every night, regardless of the troubles I was facing. I'm not saying I needed God because God took the troubles away. I needed God because regardless of what I was going through, He was the reason I could lay my head down peacefully at night. Now, I told you that the turning point of my life started when I met Kavita. But let's talk about you, Kavita, and what brought you to that turning point in your life.
I'm pretty sure when you said the turning point when you met me, probably it was a chaotic one, right?
It's been chaotic at times.
The chaos started when you met me.
It's been very interesting at times, but I would not change it for anything. When I look back on the version of myself today and the version of myself 10 years ago, I'm much happier in my shoes.
Well, I guess God sends you the right person at the right time.
Yes, He does. Indeed, He does. So let's start with your story.
So I am born not in a pastor's family, the opposite of my husband here, Kevin. And I did not know who is God, what is God, right? And the environment or the place that I grew up was very different because I was born in a very small family. So I have an elder brother who's 3 years apart from me and my mom and my dad, right? We are a very small family. Basically, we are not believers. I grew up not knowing who is God. We were six. We were Punjabis. Every evening, I would see my mom sitting down and doing prayers, chanting over a book. They have something, that she will just pray and pray and pray. I remember standing by the door and looking at her, and I was just curious because you're still small, so you're still seeking, you're looking for answers. Is this God? Is God in the book? What she's talking about when she prays, does God listen to her? Does it go to God directly, whatever that she's praying from the book? Because it's not coming from your heart. So a lot of questions. My father had a Bible. This is his second marriage to my mom. In the first marriage, he converted. He was baptized and all that. I'm not sure whether he was a believer or not, but that's where I saw the Bible for the first time in my life from my father. He has this Bible, a very old one, a very torn Bible. He takes it with him everywhere he goes. It's a very small one, like a pocket Bible, right? I was always curious, why do you carry a Bible everywhere you go, even to the shop, even to wherever you're going? I was always curious, but I never asked him.
Was he a full-blown believer or?
I don't know, to be honest. There are times that I see him kneeling down to God and praying and saying the Lord's Prayer. At that moment, I didn't know what was the Lord's Prayer. I don't know what is prayers. But sometimes I would see him sitting down in his room, opening his Bible and reading. There are a few times that I overheard him praying, saying interesting things from the Bible, which I never understood. And these are the Old Testament, right? It was very complicated for me. I couldn't understand the words, of course, being in that age, right? Yeah, so it was a lot of question for me. I didn't understand. Yes, he used to pray every once in a while, but something about my father is that he isn't perfect. He used to do well in life and all that until certain things took part in his life and everything turned over, right? He just completely lost everything in his life and he started to drink and he started to get involved with wrong people and he was heavily in alcohol. I grew up with a father who's like that, abusive, not towards us, but towards my mom, verbally abusive and physically as well. So I grew up with that kind of environment. It was very stressful. Every day, imagine you live in fear. You don't know what is going to happen. You don't know whether your father is going to come back sane or insane. You don't know whether your mom is going to live or not today. And I was very little, and my brother, to be honest, he wasn't present most of the time. He found his life and he was most of the time with his friends. So I was there most of the time witnessing all this, and I was trying to understand why, right? So came one day, right? I was about 8 years old. Right? I still remember till today, it's still fresh in my head because this is my turning point. This was my turning point in my life, right? This is where my faith started when I was 8 years old. I used to go to my room when I was very young and I used to close the door. Whenever the fighting starts, I'll go into my room. I call it my black box. So this is my black box with the lights off and it's dark. I just look up the skies and I always thought the stars were listening to me. Maybe that's God. I don't know. I was trying to look in the sky where you're always back, right? God, please do something. Stop. But God has never stopped any of it. It continued until one day when I was about 8 years old. The fighting was intense because it was family-related issues. My dad was furious, more furious than he would always be. I thought that day I was going to lose my mom because it was really bad. And Even the neighbors could hear it. My dad was going all over the place.
I just want to paint the picture here, right? Both Kavita and I come from very poor backgrounds.
Yes.
We lived in tiny little flats. You just have the necessities that you need to survive. Kavita, your house did not even have a TV.
No
And
such
barely
thing.
any furniture.
Nothing. My only entertainment was newspapers. I remember I had to sit and read newspapers, old newspapers or whatever, just read it. That was my entertainment, my YouTube, my, Netflix. That was it.
So that day, your dad's obviously been on the drink.
Yes.
He's abusing your mom.
Yes.
You run and hide in the room.
Yeah,
What goes on?
so I was, so today, this day was very scary for me. I was frightened and I was really scared because it was different from any other days, right? The normal days are, I know they're just fighting, I'll just close the door and that's it, right? But today, I really thought that the amount of anger that my dad was having in him, I thought that I was going to lose my mom, to be honest. So I was very scared. I was shaking and I went into my room and I locked myself in the room and it was in the dark. I remember I kneeled down to God and I was crying and I lost it. I was not in control. And I cried and I was begging God. I said, God, please make it stop. If you're really there, make it stop. Begged you many times. I don't know if you're listening to me or not. I just want it to stop. That's it. It was coming from all my heart. Whatever was in me, that's left, I said, just let it stop. That's it. That's all I want. As an 8-year-old, right? I wasn't asking for anything. I've never asked God for anything. Despite having nothing, I never asked. But this was coming from whatever energy that I had. I just gave it to God. And I used to beg. But unfortunately, nothing stopped. Right? So it was still going on and it was still the same. But what I felt at that moment was very different. So God didn't let anything stop, but God gave me this discomfort that I cannot imagine. I cannot tell, the words cannot describe this comfort that I got from God. It's like someone was hugging you and it was giving you the warm feeling and it was really comforting. Something that I've never received in my entire life. I've never received that kind of comfort and that peace. I've never felt that way before, not even from my parents. Immediately, the fear, the crying and everything, I was shaking and everything stopped, right? I was shivering because I was scared and everything immediately stopped. At that moment, I felt like it was a presence of God. I asked then in myself silently, is that God? Is that you? I didn't hear anything. There was no answer. But to be honest, the feeling was real. The comfort was real. Whenever you feel like this, whenever you beg, God will not directly come and tell you. Today I learned that He doesn't come directly and tell you, yes, I'm here, my child. No. He comes and give you a very special feeling. But probably because I was a child back then, He hugged me and He said, I'm here. It's like, do not worry. After that, I was calm, I was peaceful. I just remember I woke up in the morning next day. I don't know how. I went to sleep, ignoring everything that was going on. I went to sleep. I woke up in the morning and everything was fine. Nothing extraordinary. My father was recovering from his hangover. My mom was fine, uninjured, and it was just a normal day again. What happened? I don't know. It was just in a blink of an eye, everything stopped. Screaming was still going on in the background. But in me, something happened, right? In me, something changed. It's like God was just being there with me, hugging me. Go to sleep. That's it. I'm there. I'll fix it. Don't worry.
So that was when you knew there was a God, but you hadn't made that connection yet between God and an identity for God. Who is this God?
Yeah.
Jesus. You just knew that God
Yeah.
is there.
Yeah, God is there. Yeah. I knew that there's a person called God and He can make things happen because He did it for me.
So you were obviously very close to your mom.
Yeah.
And you can even say that you felt very protective of your mom.
Of course.
And then your mom passed.
So my mom, she's the center of my universe, right? She means a lot to me and she's everything to me, right? The reason I live, the reason I work so hard is because of her, to be honest. She had nothing in her life growing up. So I made a point in myself, my life, I told myself in a very young age, right? I'm going to work hard so that I can provide my mom everything that she didn't have in her life. I finished my studies and I funded my own studies by working around odd jobs and all that, right? In restaurants, right? You name it, I did it. Life was tough. So if you want to get that degree, that paper, you've got to do it yourself, right? I did it myself. In a very young age, I remember I started working when I was 14 or 15 years old. And whatever that I earned, my smallest salary was 200-300 back then, right? That alone was
300 ringgit. That's
Yes.
about $50 a
and
month.
that was luxury for me. I used to be so happy. Whatever odd jobs that I do, I get that much of money. The first thing I do is I'll give it to my mom. So, mommy, what do you want to eat today? I have money, I'll take her out. So whatever little I had, every time I think about my mom, I go to work. You're the reason I go to work, mommy. She's everything to me, and I was very protective over her. And my mom worked very hard. Maybe because I see her working very hard for me and my brother, right, to provide whatever little that she could, to allow us to study and to have that education and, to be able to provide whatever little that she could so that we can have a good life, right? I saw her doing all that. It was not easy because no matter sick or not, she still worked. She struggled for us. She could have gotten an easier life, but she didn't. She picked us. So seeing all that, I was very close with my mom, but unfortunately, things didn't work out the way I planned. My mom fell sick when I was in my teens, early 20s. She fell sick, so I had to stop everything. Halfway, I had to quit my job as well because my mom was diagnosed with cancer and it was a very last stage when we found out.
Back then, if something hurt, you just sucked it up and carried on. Pain is pain.
Life goes. We couldn't even afford a painkiller like an aspirin or something. It was too expensive. We couldn't afford it. So you just suck it up and move on, right? My mom had complaining about it for a long time, but we couldn't do anything about it because we couldn't afford it, right? But at the very last end of it, I was worried because her pain was really severe. Then I remember taking her to a hospital about 30 minutes away from my house. This is a government hospital. The doctor immediately, when saw her, without any test or whatever, just saw her tummy. It was bloated at that time. And she just touched and he knew something is growing. She immediately was admitted and then they ran through the test and all that. Then they found out. And after that, the surgery came and all those kind of things. So doctor was giving hopes, yes, your mom, so she'll go through all that radiotherapy. It's very, very painful, to be honest. I heads up to those who have gone through that. I have seen my mom, how you become a complete different person, right? The pain, the heat in yourself, right? In the body, right? It burns everything, literally burns everything, right? Every day, every night, I hear my mom crying because of that pain, right? The chemo, right? Oh, I couldn't take it. I was there with her day and night looking after her, and at the same time I juggle with the house routine as well. I go back in the morning, I do whatever I'm supposed to, then I go back to the hospital in the afternoon, I look after her. So this time me and my brother was a team, right? My brother was working in a restaurant. I remember he couldn't provide much, just 200 or 300 ringgit. So we were supporting each other. I was being with my mom, he was providing. He couldn't come to the hospital because he had to work and give us that money. My dad in the background was just drinking and all that. I was very angry with him. I remember not talking to him. I didn't even care about him at that point. It was just my mom. Then I think 6 months had passed and in and out the hospital, I think just about few times, but most of the time she was in the hospital. Months, sometimes I think more than a month, she would be in the hospital, right? Towards the end of that 6 months, I remember it was January. I remember she was in the hospital. That one afternoon, I had to go and get some documents from the hospital, so I had to go away. That afternoon, I received a phone call from the same hospital, a nurse calling me and telling me, come now, your mom is really critical, right? She's really critical. I was like, what? I just saw her this morning. She was fine. What happened? So I immediately ran up to the ward and I suddenly saw there were a lot of specialists around her, doctors and nurses. There was a few of them surrounded my mother, right? She was just surrounding her. So I was like, what happened? I left in the morning and she was fine. And she was in an oxygen mask. Before this, she wasn't in oxygen. Suddenly she was in an oxygen mask and all that. And then I remember one doctor just hold my hand and this guy told me, look here, your mom, she's very critical. We detected there were organ failures, right? Because she was heavily given morphine time after time after time. They didn't realize that her organs were failing. Kidneys were failing, her heart couldn't take it. Everything was failing, right? Because of chemo and because of a condition inside, right? And the cancer was spread all over her body, right? And then the doctor gave me suggestion, we can put her on a machine until all the family members arrive and all that. I looked at the doctor. I remember that look I gave to the doctor. I didn't say a word. I just let go of his hand and I said, leave me. My mom is not going to be on any machine. That's it. I don't want, her to be on any machine. To me, it's not natural, right? Why force, right? I didn't know anything. I was blank. Everything in me froze. I sat beside my mother. She opened her eyes and tears were flowing. She held my hand. I was holding her hand so tight. And then I felt like she was telling me, it's time. I will go. She was telling me that. I could see it from her eyes, right? So the machine I saw, it was going down, right? The pulse was going down from 60 to 50 to 40 to 30, right? And then finally there was no beep anymore. It was just static. My mom passed away looking at me with still tears flowing from her eyes, and she was gripping my hand so tight till they had to separate my mom's hand, my hand and her hand, because it froze so fast, right? And she had to let go. I broke down. I wasn't in tears. I wasn't crying. I was shocked. I was just shocked, to be honest. It was the most hardest thing ever. Your loved one, someone that you love the most, dying beside you.
You went back to that dark room. You went back to the black box.
I was in that black box again. I was just in a black box. I couldn't speak. I couldn't digest whatever that was happening. I took a moment. I couldn't process it. Moments later, I suddenly saw there were so many people in the hospital. I don't know how they came, from where they came, who called them. I didn't call anyone. I was just with my mom. I even saw my father there. Everyone was rushing, do this, do that, right? I just left everyone. I was like, okay, now just go and do what you're supposed to do. Bury her or whatever, right? I walked out and I remember walking out this ward and everyone was looking at me. The nurses, some of the nurses were very sad because I knew them personally. I was there for so long, right? And they were holding my hand and trying to comfort me. And I don't know, I had no feeling. So I walked out of that ward. I walked and I walked and I walked and I walked out of the hospital. At this point, I saw myself, but I couldn't feel myself. I couldn't feel anything, right? And at one point, I reached to this end of the road. I crossed the road with so many cars. I could have died, but I didn't. I crossed this road and I reached at the end of the road and I stopped. I looked up the sky and I asked, God, where are you, right? Where are you? At that point, I really needed him. And I asked him, why? Isn't it not enough for whatever that I had gone through? I'm just starting to build my life to give whatever that I have to this person that I love the most. But why have you taken it away before I can even do anything? Why? As usual, there was no answer. So I was, when at that moment, when everything froze and I asked God, where are you? And I asked God, why? After that, to be honest, the relationship between me and this God that I found when I was 8 years old, it was not a good relationship, to be honest. I had no God in me. I have broken up with this God. I have kept him far away in my life, not anywhere close to my heart or my mind. I was angry at this God for 3 years, I still remember. So our family has broken up, right? My mom gone. My dad has just, I don't know, I didn't know what he was doing because 3 years I hadn't had any contact with him. My brother, I don't know what he was doing, right? He was very wild at that time. So, being teenager, he was just doing whatever he could in his life, right? I was there 3 years wandering around like a homeless person. I was going everywhere except my home because my house had so much memories of my mom. I couldn't even step in. After my mom had passed away, I packed everything, my clothes, whatever that I needed, and I just walked off, not knowing where I was going to go. Because I told myself, I'm not going to step into this house anymore. I was like, you're not with me, you're not with me, you're not with me. After that 3 years, what came to my realization was, if God wasn't with me, in that 3 years, there were so many things that happened in my life that I could have even died. Things could happen. But I did that without realizing and I came out safe. How did I survive?
So you realized that you'd gone through all this And there must have been someone
Yes.
looking out for you.
Towards the end of that 3 years, suddenly, out of nowhere, I just told myself, okay, fine, it's enough. I snapped. I don't know what made me snap, but I said, it's enough. I sat down, then I thought to myself, like, I have gone through so many things. How am I still alive today? It's a miracle. But when you come out alive, when you come out still breathing, you can sit and you can still breathe, that's where you question, like, how? Then when that realization kicked in, I started asking again, where are you? So I started seeking. I remember this church not so far away from where I live. So I started going to church once a week, and I remember going there earlier before people arriving because the atmosphere in the church itself was very peaceful. I felt a different energy when I sat down there alone. I used to sit down there, not meditating and all that. I never knew how to meditate. I just sat down there. How do I pray? How do I do this? I don't know anything. People were kneeling down when they prayed. I didn't know how to do that as well. So I didn't know anything. Then I started doing this every single week. There were still no answers, to be honest. I never met this God. I was asking, right? Show yourself, right? Show yourself to me. I know you are there. You were with me for that last 3 years or even before that, since I was 8 years old. You came to me. To be honest, He was there since I was born. So my realization started later. Today I can tell myself I had abandoned God. I left Him when I was angry, but God has never left me. He's never left my side. Regardless of how angry you are, once you get to know this God, He will always be there. He has been protecting me since day one. He knew me since I was born. I took the time to get to know Him, to open up. It's all within myself. How long are you going to take? It took me 8 years. After 8 years, I saw this God. Not saw, I felt this God. After that, things started to happen, trials and everything in your life, right? He wants you to be close to Him, but He wants you to experience Him at the same time. That's why He makes you go through all these things, so that when you go through all these things, you will seek for Him. That's what I did, right?
So you were going to church, you were trying to find the answer because now you knew there was a God, you knew that He was looking after you. You were trying to identify this God at
Yes.
this point.
Yeah.
That comes to the next part of our story, which is how we met. So this, kids, is the story of how I met your mother. We were colleagues, we were working together, and I was a boss. I organized a very important business trip to Madrid, and she was one of the people that was going on this trip. It was a large group, and I'd noticed her by then because Kavita is a very beautiful woman. She still is.
Oh, thank you.
I always tell her she grows more beautiful with each passing day.
Oh.
So we went on this trip, right? One of the weekends, we decided to take a little trip to a town just outside of the city. We were enjoying ourselves, and then I saw this church. One of the habits I have is I like to go into these small churches and just say a short prayer. So I walk into this church and I see Kavita sitting there. I didn't know what her faith was, whether she was a believer or not, but I saw her sitting in that pew and praying. And something within me clicked. And I went over to her and I asked her, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm praying." Maybe it was the resonance of her doing what I had come there to do. But I just asked her, "Can I sit down and pray together with you?" And she said, "Okay." So we sat down there next to each other. She said her prayer, I said my prayer. But I think that was the first time a connection formed between us because we had sat and prayed next to each other. Things developed from there. Obviously, we got married.
But that connection you were saying, right? To be honest, I didn't feel anything, any connection at that point, right? But God answers you in various different ways, right? So at that point or moment, today I can say that was the answer I was looking for, which is Kevin, right? Because if I hadn't known you or we didn't get married or whatever, I would not know more about God. I was trying to seek for God, right? So I'll go to churches and I will sit down alone. That day, God sent that answer, which was you. Yeah, so you were the answer. Without me knowing.
We complemented each other, right? So with my background and coming from a pastor's family, it was what Kavita was looking for,
Correct.
those answers. Who is God? Who is Jesus? What did he do for me? I had those answers to give
Yes.
her. And Kavita came from her background and everything that she had gone through. And to a young, cocky, arrogant guy, I needed that grounding because things
Yeah.
were about to get even harder for us.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of my strength from Kavita because she had gone through horrible things in her life. And that grounding passed on to me. So we complemented each other
Yeah,
in
we
that
did.
sense.
Yeah. So God wasn't going to come and answer me like, I'm here, like what I said, right? I'm here, my
Yeah.
child. No, He's not going to physically tell us that He show Himself to you. So yeah, I got my answer through that.
The funny thing is, we found out later that our whole lives, we had actually lived just a few streets away from each other. We grew up in a town called Petaling Jaya. She was literally 4 or 5 streets away. Then my family moved to a town called Shah Alam, and that's where her family moved to. Then my family moved to a place called Puchong, and she moved there as well. So it's very funny. And in my wedding speech, I said, I finally get to marry the girl that's been living down the street from me my entire life. And it's funny because I feel like God always kept us close to each other, at least in each other's orbits. But He waited to pull the trigger on us actually meeting each other in a tiny little village outside of Madrid because that was the right time. That was His time. He didn't just bring us together, He'd been walking us towards each other our entire lives. Now, we've both carried this testimony for years, but in the last year, something shifted. We felt this purpose to do His work. He's been so good to us despite who we were. At times in both our lives, we had rejected God and we had pushed Him away, but yet He was faithful to us. If that's you today, if you found this podcast because something in your life isn't working and you don't know where else to turn, I want to leave you with one verse. Isaiah 43, verse 1. Thus says the Lord your God, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. He knows your name. Whatever it is you're going through right now, He knows your name. Can I pray for you? Father, today there is a brother or a sister out there who's sitting in a room all by themselves asking why. The uncertainty and hopelessness feels overwhelming. The mountains seem too high and the valleys just too deep. But Lord, today I say to them, you are Israel, you are Jacob. He who knit you together and counted the hairs on your head before you were born, He has redeemed you. Arrows formed against you are many, but God has drawn a line. He has covered you with His precious blood and claimed you. You are His. Amen.
Amen.
If something in this episode found you today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with one person who needs to hear it. Just one. That's how testimony travels. We also have a Patreon. Links are in the show note. If you would like to be a part of this ministry that we're starting to build, we would appreciate it if you became a patron. Until our next episode, I'm Kevin,
I'm Kavita.
and this is His faithfulness. He was
Was
faithful, He is faithful, He will be faithful.